Welcome back to another episode of the CNC on CFB show. Con, we talked about the CFP, all the frantic action that led into the Final Four
hmm
committee, ultimately drawing the lines in the sand. And look, we have that still some time to look forward to with the games on the field, but still a lot going on with the players, transfer carousel, recruiting, all that jazz. I think we're at record setting over 1,500 players, give or take. I mean, it sounds unbelievable. But before we get into all that madness, I think we need to recognize look, it's Heisman weekend.
hmm
We know who's there in New York.
hmm
I figured let's just give you guys our individual views of really how we rank these four that are in New York. And then we'll just, as we talked about the CFP, we'll give you a little bit of an update
hmm
on everyone's completely non controversial decision
Yeah.
about really that number four spot. But we'll get there in a second. Con, I'll give you the floor for this
I'd
Heisman.
actually like you as, I'd like you to open it
Okay.
up and take your victory lap because it
Okay.
seems that all of the dominoes have fallen in the direction you've been talking all season. I want to
Okay.
see how you feel, not just about that, but about all four of these guys.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Jane Daniels, I think it's not too difficult for me. I think he should be the favorite. He obviously has been the heavy, heavy, heavy favorite. After Nix and Penix it wasn't really a Heisman moment like a
hmm
dominant showcase, if you will, in that Pac-12 title game. And I think, well, the only non-quarterback, Marvin Harrison Jr., we both, I mean, he deserves, obviously, giving him so much sunshine, spotlight, just a pure difference maker at the position. And quite frankly, with Daniels and Harrison, I think they're a one and two in my book. For three and four, I guess you just gotta I'll give the edge to Michael Penix at three for winning in the head to head twice.
hmm
Does he have the better weapons? Sure. But to his credit, he rapping on the sidelines, leading some comebacks when he's had to. I think that's how I think the Heisman voting should shape out. I think Marv though might by virtue of playing receiver, I could see him ended up somehow be criminally being like fourth,
hmm
falling behind the three quarterbacks. But where do you like on with your top?
Yeah. So I have the same list in the same order
Mm-hmm.
that you just gave, and for pretty similar reasons. I think Jaden Daniels was just so unbelievable this year. I mean, it's reminiscent of the last guy to win one with three losses was Lamar Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
who just was so clearly the best, most electric player in the country that
Absolutely.
you couldn't even factor in wins and losses to the decision.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's a clear runaway number one. Like you had said, you think it's a 1-2 punch. I don't even think it's that. I think he's so far and away above everyone. And then I agree. I think with Marvin Harrison Jr. at two, um, for similar reasons. Both Penix and Nix had the opportunity to take a Heisman moment, not just in the Pac-12 title game, when they played each other earlier in the season. We were
Mm-hmm.
talking already about the Heisman race going into that matchup and saying whoever wins this game is probably going to have their Heisman moment. And
Yep.
the very next episode, we came back on and said Washington won, but it didn't feel like a Heisman moment for Penix. And it obviously isn't a Heisman moment if you lose the game as Bo Nix. And then we had almost a dead repeat in the you know
Yeah.
in the
No.
conference title game. So it felt like neither of those guys, when given the opportunity, went out and took the Heisman. The only thing about Marvin Harrison that I could see him being at four, and I wouldn't be mad about it at all, is that statistically, there are multiple receivers in the country who have similar or some with even better stats on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not everything that goes into the Heisman, and that's not everything that goes into being a great player.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all believe he's the best receiver in the country. But if there are other guys putting up better stats at the same position, you know, I don't love being like, well, he's just super talented. Let's give him a trophy.
No, it's fair enough. It's fair enough. And part of it too, and it's to that point, it isn't really fair to then say, oh, over his body of work over 2 seasons and
Mhm.
how he didn't really get an award last season.
Yeah.
It's unfair to just say, oh, well, this guy is just from a pure talent, from a oh, he's going to be a top 3 pick at the next level. Oh,
Hmm.
he's been doing this for a couple seasons now. It is a 1 year award,
Yep.
and Heisman moments just didn't quite.
Yeah, he didn't have
No
one
one,
either.
yeah, no one really had
Yeah.
that definitively. And I just go back. It's funny that with the two Pac-12 guys, you almost just wish like if both games had really gone to overtime potentially, then that would be a whole different story in
Yep.
terms of just the idea of, oh my God, two so evenly matched teams respectively. It's really the quarterback that maybe has to really
Yeah.
elevate his team in both scenarios, but just wasn't quite. Just kind of like fizzled out with both those games at the end, a missed
Mhm.
field goal, and then
Yeah.
just couldn't get a stop on when you
Yeah.
needed to on third down.
And the other thing I will say about those two quarterbacks is I thought, and I don't think it's just me, I think pretty much everyone who watched them thought Bo Nix was the better player this year. The reason I
Yeah,
would have
yeah.
Penix above him in the Heisman is that, yeah, winning games, even if it's not always pretty, is the point of the sport. And Michael Penix didn't lose a single game.
Hmm. And you talk about, I mean, how quarterback driven awards or quarterback centric leagues and just the spotlight that is absorbed. I mean, it's a little bit weak by default, but with Penix, yeah, he did look. It's not like he was just laps leagues behind from a
No.
production standpoint, and he showed a lot. Yes, he's been playing with some incredible playmakers and a high powered offense in general, but yeah, it's you just got to go. I think Penix deservedly so ahead of Knicks in that sense, but yeah, it's a whole different debate about who the truly the best football player or
Mhm.
but that's I mean that's kind of all semantics at this point.
Yep.
Talk about maybe not so much semantics, just interesting decisions, interesting choices of words, rationalizations or rationale. I guess update on I guess why Florida State was omitted from the playoff.
Yeah, so the committee released a detailed statement that I thought was pretty interesting, and I don't want to make it a whole, college football playoff
Mm-hmm.
episode, but I think one of the things that was very interesting is for years we haven't gotten any insight into the process that happens in this room. They peeled back the curtain a little bit with this one. One of the most interesting parts I thought was that they, everyone always wonders, are they locked in this conference room all night? Do they sleep? Do they this? Do they that? Do they
Mm-hmm.
have the decision at midnight and they just don't announce it till noon the next day? They said they voted, which was weird. They said between 6 and 8 times, so I guess 7 times.
Yeah, yeah.
But they voted 7 times that night, and we're at a gridlock. I know there's 13 people, so you can't be at a true gridlock, but I guess we're.
On 6 to 7, yeah,
Or maybe someone was abstaining or couldn't make up their mind, whatever. They were through 7 votes. They couldn't solve that final Alabama versus Florida State question. So they left the conference room, went back to their hotel rooms, went to bed, came back in the morning, and in the waning hours of this decision having to be made, graphics having to get made up for the TV show,
yeah,
all of that,
yeah.
they voted the final time to put Alabama in over Florida State, and the rationalization they gave for that was was a bit interesting as well. At least when you juxtapose it to the Liberty decision, which was that when asked about why Liberty got the New Year's Six bowl game that goes to one Group of Five spot, that spot will be a 12th playoff spot next year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to set the precedent now. What does make the best Group of Five
Sure.
team? Liberty had the worst, dead last strength of schedule in the entire country. Liberty went undefeated, and we've been a very pro Liberty show.
Sure.
But when addressing that, they said specifically you couldn't ignore how Liberty just kept winning games, which feels antithetical to
Yeah, a little bit different. Yeah.
to their decision. About apparently, you could ignore how Florida State just kept winning games.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think we spent enough time on it last week. I just thought that was an interesting piece to read that they put out.
Yeah, and part of it, I guess. Just who knows? I mean, even the committee chair, I guess Boo Corrigan, it is. I mean, even whoever from that room. I mean, we'll never really know. To truly, it's a whole behind closed doors, and
Mm-hmm.
and for the sake of it, I feel like it was always going to be. Oh, it was such a difficult decision,
Mm-hmm.
back and forth gridlock. Who
Yeah.
really knows, right?
Yeah,
Who really
it did
knows?
read like they were trying to curry back some favor from Florida
Just to
State
say,
fans
yeah,
and
just to
saying,
try to, salvage
yeah.
something.
They
Yeah.
also did address the Georgia situation with a lot of people saying, you keep Florida State out because they're not one of the four best, but then everyone in the world thinks Georgia is one of the four best. Why were they kept out?
Hmm.
And they said that they did not meet the criteria necessary to get a spot without winning their conference championship. So basically, they were saying, again, we have all the criteria. They tell us, but they don't tell us which way they order it. It seems to me like they were saying conference championship is number one on the criteria list.
Yeah.
And then to get in without a conference championship, you have to meet every other, thing.
Hmm. And
So that
yeah.
was an interesting little thing there. Again, conference championships won't factor in next year because everyone who wins one of the power conferences will automatically be in.
Hmm.
But still interesting to for years we've wondered how much do they weight conference championship versus overall record versus strength of schedule
Yeah.
versus head to head.
Hmm. Just glad it's going to be a lot different next year.
Yeah.
Glad. Cannot say that enough. I think everybody, all fans, people just want to see. It'll just be beautiful this time next season, and really the timing too, of you know a much condensed timeline between the conference championship weekends and then the playoffs. For the 8 teams that have to just things have to be decided
Yeah.
well before the normal January New Year's Six bowls. But enough of the playoff for now. We know we're gonna be able to talk about those games, those
Ray, we've got a
matchups.
lot of time to break down those games,
Yeah,
leading into them and then coming out of them,
predictions.
break down the national championship.
Hmm.
But
Why not just focus on the players individually and
hmm
the chaos that just seems ever evolving in
hmm
the transfer portal landscape? And shout out to On Three, we're utilizing their kind of breakdown here. You see now we're a little bit minimized, but we're not trying to minimize how insane the quarterbacks that lie in the portal. A
I see
lot
what
of
you did
turnover.
there.
Yep. Little creative jokes, comedian here, but let's just go starting, top down, Con.
Yeah.
First, maybe we can even just break down how I individually maybe rank these players or view these quarterbacks in a way, but starting with On Three's ranking, Cam Ward.
Yeah, I mean, this is your guy, and this actually kind of leads into a question I've wanted to ask you is you're in the quarterback market. Spencer Rattler is gone, and we wish him,
Yeah.
best of luck in all future endeavors.
Yep.
But you being a fan of a team that needs a quarterback,
Hmm.
transfer portal seeming like the best way to get a guy who's going to come in and start immediately.
Hmm.
How do you like these guys? I know Cam Ward has been your guy for a couple years now at Washington State.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny because a little behind the curtain. I mean, Khan and I and some other handful of friends, we a little bit of a college kind of fantasy merged with NFL fantasy type deal where we had a draft of college players a
hmm
couple years back, and it was funny because we got really into the weeds, and you and I are the more relative college obsessed
Yes.
players within this little hodgepodge league we had, and it got into the 20th round, give or take, and it's like it comes back to me on the snake, and I'm like, okay, I'll do Cam Ward, and then you say, "Oh my God, I was going to be my pick," and he was my next pick. This guy, this transfer out of Incarnate Word, who lit the FCS on fire,
hmm
um, setting records, unbelievable stat sheet, and here he is going to Washington State. Had at that time could have gone to Oxford with Lane Kiffin,
hmm
would have been intriguing there, but went to Washington State, saw Shades of the Air Raid, that beautiful Mike Leach inspired, fast pace, just points, points, points. And he's had a bit of a up and down 2 years, but we saw him. Look, we talked about him against Penix.
Yeah.
He's a very, very, I think, high level talent. Can't overlook the really, I guess, I mean, there's Gunslinger. He can kind of make every throw. There's the arm talent, but really the kind of Houdini, the maneuverability to
Yep.
always keep a play alive speaks, I mean, volumes and just being able to transcend maybe bad offensive line play.
And is a little reminiscent of Spencer Rattler
A
and
little
how
bit.
all of the success you had this year seemed to be when the offensive line broke down and
Transcend,
yeah.
yeah. And as much as, I mean, yeah, it's funny. We're both of our programs are in a bit of a QB unique situation.
I would say I'm not quite as worried
Okay.
as if I were a Gamecock
Yeah,
fan.
no,
But
I get the worry. I mean, if we look, I'm not totally skies falling with my Gamecocks because we have Lenora Sellers who
mhm.
looked in bunches, looked very good. But I would not mind at all seeing competition. And look, Cam Ward would be at the top of my wish list, but he's just he's in his own league with maybe a couple guys I think in terms of talent, veteran presence,
Yep.
and just not. Yeah, we're just not as much. Oh, I could only dream, of Cam
Yeah.
Ward coming down south to South Carolina here in Columbia, or I guess down in Columbia. We're not basically in Columbia here, just a little bit all over the place. I think he's bound for man. I guess if I had to go with my gut, I think he might be going to USC. That's kind of what I'm thinking with Cam Ward.
I think he would fit there. That would make some sense.
It's been on his hot list or rumored.
Mhm.
It's funny. All these every couple days, it's a new trio
Yeah.
associated with all these top quarterback transfers. But I just think Ohio State's been the heavily rumored, I guess, or connected.
Yes.
I
I've
just
seen a
don't
lot of that.
know. I don't know. I just feel like he might stay out west. And
Yeah. And Cam Ward, I think it's easy to think like how would he even fit into a Ryan Day offense because we've just seen the last two quarterbacks not really play like Cam Ward. But before that, they had Justin Fields who did a lot of Cam Ward type stuff. So I think it would still make some sense. And Ohio State just gets the best players, so
yeah,
that
and he, to his credit, I mean, I think he's a little bit some semi scheme agnostic in a sense.
mhm,
He could operate, I think, from the pocket and dish it out
mhm,
45 times a game, like CJ Stroud had looked and
mhm.
done at a very high level with Ohio State. And yeah, it's because it's unique with even with that whole Ryan Day system. It's like, oh, you don't even with Fields, how he was kind of semi tampered or
Mhm.
hindered with the rushing frequency in
Yeah, there
college.
was there was not a lot of, or there never is with Ryan Day designed quarterback runs.
No,
A lot of field
no.
magic was when a play broke down and he had to make something happen.
Hmm.
But you can see that works pretty damn well in that system.
Yep. Nope. It absolutely does, and it's just yeah. I'm not. I think Ohio State might get another guy. Not too far down on this list, but that's kind of yeah. Cam Ward, think the world of him. I mean, I guess Con. Maybe we'll just go back and forth, give our prediction where you think. I mean, where would you if you had to make just to throw a dart out there with Cam Ward?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything makes so much sense with USC. I don't see why that wouldn't be my pick, so that's where I'll go.
Okay, cool. Dante Moore connected with your Canes.
Mm-hmm.
Some crystal ball here. I guess that's kind of more to 24/7. Their crystal, not to being careful of intellectual property here or trademarks with crystal whole idea of crystal ball trying to predict. But Dante Moore, he's been some interesting connections. Originally was an Oregon guy, and then Dillingham goes down to Arizona State. Arizona State's kind of got yeah, they're not really within I guess the picture necessarily.
Well, they just, this past year, not that he played more than a game or two, but they just got Jaden Rashada, who was a
Hmm.
really highly recruited
Yeah,
guy, and I'm sure they're planning on having be their starter for the next two or
you
three
would
years.
think.
So,
Yeah, you would think. So it's not really, and I think with Dante Moore, I mean, he's a little bit more, I think, of a high profile anyway. Not to demean or look down on Arizona State
mhm.
over there, but just a unique, very, I feel like almost as unpredictable as any in this transfer carousel here, transfer portal madness mayhem. I with Dante Moore, I mean, I kind of think I think Ohio State. I think he might be bound for Ohio State. That's kind of my guess because I think Ryan Day could get him to look a lot more like the C.J. Strouds of the world that
Hmm.
saw that offense humming
Hmm.
than it just was this past year. From Michigan, Detroit area, I've seen Michigan linked as well.
Michigan's going to need a quarterback
Oh,
next
they
year.
are. They
Yep.
are. They are absolutely going to. Man, if he goes down though, down to Florida with your Canes, that would be a very interesting, intriguing landing spot.
Yeah, obviously I'll take all the super talented guys I can get. We have a guy on the roster right now, Ja'Cory Brown, who
Hmm.
was a very high recruit, played sparingly as a freshman last year, redshirted this season, but is going to play in our bowl game. I'm pretty high on him. Again, he was also a high recruit, not quite to
Yep.
Dante Moore's level, but a guy that there's a lot of hype around in the program. And frankly, what I saw out of Dante Moore this year, I didn't like very much. So I'm not as stoked on this as I probably should be with us being connected to the number two quarterback in the
Hmm.
portal.
Sure. And it was such a tough, him having to even say with Dante Moore in the portal, it's a tough pill to swallow, I feel like, as a college football fan, because you would have hoped Chip Kelly, Taylor Made would have been such a bright future, you would have thought.
You would have thought it would have been a pairing that would have brought UCLA back to what Chip Kelly had rolling at
Hmm.
Oregon, but
Hmm. Just a weird gauntlet of I mean, with how tough the Pac-12 was, gauntlet of a schedule, it kind of got tossed in there, game one because of unfortunate injuries.
yeah, but thrown right into the fire as
Yep.
and he, you know, if you believe it, which I don't exactly, but on paper the plan was to really not have him play this year. And
Seemed like he would be bound at some point, just a little
exactly.
bit, just maybe a little bit too quickly than we would have hoped, given almost the that expedited timeline.
Yeah.
Saw the struggles early and made the
Yeah.
midseason change
And
to go.
he did early like look overwhelmed, which is not a crazy thing for an
No,
18-year-old
nope.
playing in college football for the first time.
Hmm.
So I do still think the future's bright, but
Oh, 100%, 100%. It's just yeah, really, really maybe the most intriguing name I
mhm.
think in the portal, and so yeah, I'm guessing Ohio State.
I'll go Michigan.
Okay, okay,
Harbaugh's a hell of a recruiter.
he
Apparently, they're
is.
working on a extension, so he won't be going to the NFL if
That's
you
just the
believe
last
the tea
hurdle.
leaves.
Yeah, the last hurdle is him to put in writing. He's not going to go to the NFL
Yeah.
or ever consider
Um,
it. But
But yeah, and if he's from the area and he wants to play big time college football
mhm.
on big time television stations and all that, can't get much more big time than Michigan.
Nope, nope. But going down the list here, somebody kind of from our neck of the woods, Will Howard here. Excuse me, I will kind of just be pretty straight shooter off the bat. I think he's going to go to Michigan. That's kind of my guess for Will Howard.
Okay.
I think, look, he's operated that Kansas State offense. He's played at a high level. I think he's been maybe one of the more underrated quarterbacks in college
Well,
the last couple of
he's been
years.
really consistent. He's
Yep.
been a really steady hand in that
Hmm.
program, which is not to say that like he doesn't have a super high ceiling, but I would say if you were looking high ceiling versus high floor, him being third on this list, I think is more of a high floor than a high ceiling thing.
Sure. And I think yeah, that's no, that's I think that's a pretty fair characterization. He is just yeah, very steady, like you used the word there, steady hand, and I think
Hmm.
that's kind of if any program really looks for that, I feel like with Michigan, they're going to
Yep.
be a run first or want to establish the ground
Hmm.
game and just a steady hand
Yeah.
who's an athlete in his own right,
Yeah.
not maybe as dynamic as on the ground as like a JJ
Hmm.
McCarthy, pure athletically speaking, but he can a bit dual threat when it gets pose some problems for the
Hmm.
opposing defense. Not this one dimensional guy,
Hmm.
and I think yeah he would be an interesting option out there.
Yeah. Now the only thing is he airs the ball out a lot more than Michigan has been recently.
Yeah, yeah.
So you might wonder if he would want to go somewhere with like a
Hmm.
spread offense where he can throw for 100,000 yards and really put up a case for a Heisman or improve NFL draft stock or anything like
Sure.
that.
And USC has been, it seemed, linked for that reason
USC would
heavily.
make a lot of
Yep.
sense in that case. Yeah.
Hmm. Already, I think, in terms of the trying to make sense of the whole timeline of, okay, these guys just, the portal just opened.
Hmm.
Now it's okay, who's meeting with who?
Hmm.
Talk about, almost like official visits, and Riley was, I think, last weekend, or however. Now, I don't know, tampering is a delicate within the whole landscape. I think Riley met with, it's already been rumored, he met with Will Howard pretty early, almost immediately into the whole cycle. So I think that, of course, speaks to some interest. But I think Riley, I mean, he's definitely, I think, kind of dipping his toes, in a lot of options. I feel like obviously he
Yeah.
knows he's going to be USC is going to be an attractive spot for any quarterback, especially given the
Yeah.
pedigree of
And,
Riley.
you know, we could be talking about multiple of these guys going to one place, and if multiple of them were going to go to one place, USC seems like a pretty good destination.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we watched it last year with Ole Miss brought in three pretty big name transfer quarterbacks, and they all competed for the job.
Yeah, yeah, but really, yeah, interesting to see where Will Howard goes. We or did you give your prediction just yet?
I did not. Let's see. Without, and I'm not up on. I'm not too up on who's been rumored.
Okay,
So,
I kind of am. So yeah, okay, I'll.
yeah, I'm gonna say not Michigan. I'm gonna say Will Howard probably wants to go somewhere where he can lead the nation in passing yards. So I already used USC. Who else is looking for a quarterback?
Nebraska's kind of out there with Matt Rule. They've been linked. You've got trying to think of other Big Ten or even the SEC.
I'm saying he's going to UNC. That's my pick.
Max Johnson
Damn.
already there.
Yep. Of
It's
course,
tough. It's
Max
tough.
Johnson has already been two places where he thought he was the starter and then he wasn't.
Has. No,
So
that's very true. I mean, let's just take a
yeah,
quick peek here. Trying to yeah. I mean, look, yeah. Lincoln Riley
yeah.
meets with him. I mean, you can look. You can double dip. We'll allow double dip in here. You think USC?
No, I'm saying he's gonna go. He's gonna go play with Chip Kelly. That's my.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see who's.
This is, I think, was from his original
Oh, from his
recruiting
original
profile,
recruitment.
but that's
Kansas would be an interesting spot for Will Howard to land.
within
Yeah.
that would be a little bit talk about. I mean, he's, I think, recent, relatively well liked within the within K State fandom. That would be
Yes.
quite something if he were to make the if he were to make that move. But talk about a guy maybe that looks kind of open and shut where he might be going. Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah. Although I read something today that maybe throws a wrench in that gear
Okay.
about another quarterback on this list. So
All right. Okay. Interesting. I look. He might be one of the more pure talented. I mean, the most productive, arguably, of any of these guys. And
yeah.
look, Oregon. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that's just where it looks like, or what I've read
Mhm.
or seen, and I think it just makes a lot of sense for him to go over, head north, go up to Oregon there, and really just kind of maybe Dan Lanning. They just want to kind of keep that front foot, pick up where they left off with Bo Nix.
Yeah. The reason I say I read what I read today, and I don't know the sourcing on it or whatnot,
Okay.
is that Oregon's making a late break at Riley Leonard, who as soon as he entered the portal was connected to Notre Dame.
Yeah, and he's got the
He's
no
got the no
contact.
contact, but that was what I was reading was that he has been in contact with Oregon. So,
Hmm.
uh,
Interesting.
yeah,
Okay. I thought you were going to say maybe because, well, with this guy Jeff Lebby, maybe Mississippi State, they're an
yeah,
interesting destination.
yeah,
But
they would love to have him, but I don't think it's in the cards probably.
okay, so where do you
But you
tend
never
to
know.
lean?
He had a lot of success under Jeff Levy. Jeff
No,
Levy's the
they
head
did.
coach
They
now.
did.
It would make sense on paper.
It would.
I don't know that Mississippi State has the NIL funding that Oregon does,
Hmm.
which is a determining factor, obviously.
Yeah, of
But
course, of course. Where? So if you had to throw a guess out there,
I think he's going to Oregon. But
yeah.
it was interesting to see that Oregon was, responsive to Riley Leonard, and that Riley
Hmm.
Leonard maybe isn't 100% in on Notre Dame.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting because I actually did not I didn't realize those Riley Leonard rumors because it does seem I guess really kind of open and shut with him to potentially Notre Dame. Notre Dame. That's kind of their name. That's the name of the Notre Dame game right now. I guess they're just kind of recycling, trying to get some transfer guys. Which look, you can't really blame Freeman for doing it. If you can get a ready-made option
Yeah,
to help you
and there
contend,
aren't a lot of true freshmen who come in ready to play on the biggest
nope,
stage, and
none. And even
Riley Leonard is ready, and you
yep,
knew that Sam Hartman was ready last year, and
hmm
so I think it makes sense if you can do it.
yeah, and even look at the guys you think that would be the most relative ready-made. I mean, Dante Moore was a guy that was thought of as if there was a guy from the recent freshman
Mhm.
class that could have made an impact, instant impact, so to speak, it would have been Dante Moore. But look at anyone can struggle. No one's immune, right?
Yep.
But I guess speaking of a guy that played very well in bunches, Aiden Childs
Yep.
over at Oregon State, a very highly recruited player, was actually Malachi Nelson. Speaking of a guy that's maybe not the next in line to kind of take Lincoln Riley, his quarterback throne with Malachi Nelson.
Mhm.
Aiden Childs, his backup at Los Alamitos for a little bit, transfers, builds his own, you know, has his own spotlight at Downey, goes up with Jonathan Smith, and I think this one's pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
Bound for Michigan State with Jonathan Smith would be
Yeah.
Michigan State really kind of maybe a quick re-injection, a lot of life in that program with this potential QB reuniting with his coach.
Yeah.
Really kind of jumpstart a rebuild almost.
Yeah. Certainly offensively. The only thing is, we see on this list already, we've seen Dante Moore connected to and even
Yep.
predicted to Michigan State.
hmm
Uh, I'm sure they both don't want to be in the same program.
No,
So,
that really wouldn't make sense and they're both the similar or same age,
yeah,
same class
same
relatively.
class. Yeah.
So Riley Leonard, um, a guy that we just talked about looks very much bound for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Would make it very interesting for Notre
Yeah, there's
Dame
also
next year.
something I hadn't considered, but very much could have been the case about this whole Oregon story is as soon as he entered the transfer portal and with the announcement was the no contact order and it's assumed he's going to Notre Dame, there were a lot of, people questioning some tampering
Oh yes,
allegations.
yeah.
So it very well may be
Trying
that
some.
he's going, nah, I'm talking to Oregon
I
too.
think that's a very underrated part of this, just to try to play it up a little bit
Yeah.
more than maybe a done deal that it's already been for a while. But yeah, no contact. I didn't even realize no contact was quite a thing, but
Mhm.
it makes in a sense of players trying to really control, the narrative
Mhm.
or really control their
Well,
own.
usually you don't see it used in the way that it was used here.
hmm
This was a no contact order saying, I'm going to Notre Dame, don't even waste your time, basically,
hmm
or the reports. Usually it's used in a guy who's in a program he doesn't want to leave, but he's entering the transfer portal and maybe hiring an NIL agent and saying, hey, sniff around, but I don't need to be fielding calls from 30 different teams that I'm never going to go to. You know,
Yeah. No. So look, I think Riley Leonard makes Notre Dame definitely a CFB expanded playoff type bound team because he's just a bit more, I think, dynamic. Safe to say than
Mhm.
Sam Hartman. And look, we talked about it for quite a common theme almost on this show about Notre Dame just being a little bit disappointing compared to
Mhm.
expectations. Thought they would really, talk about an aerial threat, a very high powered offense
Mhm.
through the air, but really wasn't quite the case. I think Riley Leonard maybe just fits them a little bit better um, than Sam Hartman had this
Mhm.
past season, and maybe just yeah, elevates Notre Dame to a little bit higher. I mean, obviously, quarterback can only do so much, but really makes Notre Dame, I think, an interesting team for next season. And speaking of semi interesting, a very, very high heralded recruit,
Mhm.
Brock Vandegrift, looks like he's getting finally his potential time to shine with Bob Stoops, or
Yeah.
Mark Stoops, should I
Yeah,
say.
Mark Stoops. But yeah, this one is interesting because he was so highly recruited and just kind of thought to be the successor to Stetson Bennett at
Mm-hmm.
one point. But we haven't gotten to see him play, so
Nope,
let's we'll talk about him when we get to watch him play next year.
sure. Just that whole Georgia in general, there's a couple. I mean, look, that's kind of the harsh reality with a lot of these top programs is they consistently, you get even still there in Athens, you got Gunnar Stockton, a former South Carolina commit,
Hmm.
who was this top 5 in his class recruit for the longest time. And then it's just like you really got to be, if you're a kid in that position, graduating graduating senior, it's like you really got to pick your spots very
Yeah.
strategically and measured, because you never know if there's any incumbency, or guys that have a little bit more tenure than you. You're not nothing's guaranteed
No,
at the
I
quarterback
mean, you look
position.
at, there are famous examples where it's worked out. Justin Fields, it didn't work out at Georgia. He goes to Ohio
Yeah,
State. It's
yeah.
great. Joe Burrow doesn't
Hmm.
work out at Ohio State. He goes to LSU. It's great. But there are so many examples of guys where they just get buried on that depth chart, and then all of a sudden they're trying to make something happen. Their senior year, they've never played a down of college football yet.
Hmm.
They're not on NFL radars anymore. It's it could be really a sad situation if you don't pick your spot right.
Yep. But good to see him get really his chance to
Yeah.
do so. And still, I think it speaks to, there's maybe not, or for him, it was, if anything, would have been the time than ever to transfer. And as
Yep.
long, if you do have, look, if you have the pedigree
Yeah.
and you've been recruited, you're always going to be in the periphery, and you have options. And good to
Yeah.
see.
And I think the Kentucky choice may kind of speak to that, where he didn't try to, line up and go be Ohio State's next guy, knowing that there's going to be a lot of competition there.
Hmm.
He went to Kentucky, which has been a very good SEC program recently, don't get me wrong, but he will be the big name in that locker room.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's definitely, I think it's a good fit. It seems like a good natural fit. And maybe, yeah, talk about guys, or maybe it's just recency bias, or this idea of, oh, these guys, these
Hmm.
fresh new things, attractive new potential program leaders.
Hmm.
It's almost like, I guess, in just keeping with what we talked about just now with Riley Leonard, I think Vandegrift kind of maybe brings a bit more versatility than a Devin Leary just did,
Yep.
and maybe elevates Kentucky to more of the expectations that they had thought they were going to reach the past couple of seasons. But interesting, very interesting name, along with Kyle McCord, kind of darling of the show, or this local guy that we've been aware for a few years, a little while now. But kind of predicted Nebraska. I think that would be an interesting fit with Matt Rule.
Yeah, I have seen this reported, but not corroborated by the university or Kyle McCord. But I have seen,
I think there were.
Husker beat reporters
Mhm.
saying it's a done deal. Expect an announcement soon.
Sure, and I think because there's already been, talk about Dayton for only a day or two into the portal. It's
Hmm.
Marcus, former South Carolina OC Marcus Satterfield, who drew a lot of criticism. But yeah, Satterfield meeting with him
Hmm.
very early on. It seems, yeah, it seems like a pretty natural fit. I think maybe almost. I feel like there's so much, given that he wasn't able to lead them to a win over Michigan,
Hmm.
and just kind of the, at face value, oh, this Ohio State quarterback that struggled. I mean, I think he's maybe a little bit as good as definitely Nebraska could possibly ask, I think, from in terms of a name that they could get, and a player, I think, that definitely can elevate Nebraska, and make a lot of throws. Maybe he's not the most dynamic guy, but I think it's a very
Yeah,
intriguing
I mean,
fit.
he obviously has arm talent.
Hmm.
As you said, maybe not the most dynamic guy, but although he takes off when he has to, and it doesn't look
He
like Tom
can,
Brady running.
no,
Um,
nope.
but he's a guy who doesn't make the big mistake, and who will, if you put a good team around him, you'll be there at the end of the season like they were with Ohio State.
Yep.
He's, again, at least has not yet shown as a recruit. He was very, very highly thought of, obviously, but so far throughout college, he has not yet shown that he's going to elevate your team and, be the reason that you're there at the end. But he also didn't lose them many games until Michigan.
No, and I think it's
And he didn't
a good,
lose them, Michigan.
no,
He threw that pick at the end, but
tough, and yeah, it's,
but yeah.
you get hit, or it's tough. I mean, it's tough being the quarterback. I mean, look, it's a lot comes with the label and the responsibility, and I think, to your point, he's a very solid, I think, going to be game, not to completely limit him to a game manager, but I think elevate them to a much, or just put them in much better chances to win football games than going into Boulder, Colorado, and throwing unbelievable, just boneheaded picks,
Hmm.
not to put Jeff Sims in too bad or look down upon him too much, but just I think a much better quarterback option
Yeah.
than Nebraska has seen these last several seasons. But talk about a very interesting name, DeQuan Finn, who's been lighting it up. I mean, talk about
Yeah.
production over at Toledo.
Guy who, you know, in another world would be playing in a New Year's Six bowl game coming up.
True,
Yeah,
true.
team that we talked about multiple times this year. They were one of the best Group of Five schools. They were excellent, and he was the engine that drove that offense. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see where he goes. I haven't read any
Yeah, it's kind of it
rumors,
is
but
very almost mired in mystery. Yeah,
mhm.
there even haven't really even been too much
Yeah,
of rumor mill, but
and we do always forget that these guys can come back. You enter the portal, you're not gone
that's true
forever.
as well. Yeah,
So he may be at Toledo next year if there aren't strong,
sure.
or if the types of places he wants to go don't offer him what he wants. He very well may be back at Toledo.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I really do want to see him though. Maybe get a Big Ten potential look. And
Mhm.
it's funny, I'm thinking just kind of off the top of my head here. It's, I mean, you tell me your initial reaction.
Mhm.
I think I can maybe anticipate what it would be. But look, get a guy as dynamic as DeQuan Finn go down. I mean, what he could potentially do for Iowa.
Yeah.
I mean, that look with how anemic the quarterback play has been and how bad it's been there
Mhm.
offensively for Iowa. I think he look a guy that has multiple calling cards can, I think, maybe at least give you that dynamism, dual threat, a guy that can just pose a lot of problems to a defense more than you've had, you know, exponentially more than you've been able to the past couple seasons. I mean, just would be then your Spencer Petras, Cade McNamara is just I think
Yeah.
a very good option potentially for an Iowa team. This is just me spitballing. I have
Mhm.
no just I mean it would kind of make sense. Kind of just inject some offensive hope, just
Mhm.
some hope. Look, I was going to try to run the ball. I think it would be a very interesting potential match. I hope hopefully it wouldn't be another just through the mud. I hope for his sake, if he were to end up in a
Mhm.
spot like Iowa, he could really elevate them and at least give semi attractive brands of football a capable, competent offense. But
Yeah.
that's just off the top of my head. Um, if you had to just throw, I guess keeping with this theme, if you had to throw any or any Power Five team out there,
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the spot's already going to be taken up or whatever, but I would love to see him go back towards home and play at Michigan State. I think same
that would be
thing.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that would be. Let me. I mean, before I'm actually, I just want to check on his
Mhm.
profile here if there's any. Okay, Wisconsin to host that Big Ten West. That
Yeah,
would be
that would make a lot of
absolutely in
sense.
the same vein as Iowa. That
Yep.
absolutely okay. I could absolutely see. Okay, that would be a very interesting. Yeah, literally in the same the same thing I said with about Iowa being. I mean, absolutely that would make sense for him. And there really isn't an incumbent guy, and he absolutely would be. I think a step up and bring a lot of just bring a
Yeah.
lot to that offense. That again, is going to love to run the ball.
Yep. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of
Interesting.
sense.
Yeah,
I hope he ends up there.
that would be an awesome. Yeah, that would be an awesome match there. Talk about a guy again in the portal. As we just rounded out
Yeah.
the quarterback discussion, we're not going to go through all of them,
Mhm.
but I think you'll give or take a top
Although I
10,
want to
if you
talk
will.
about all of these guys.
Yeah, we'll g- we'll do this. We'll go. Okay, DJU. Well, he's already going to. I think,
Louisville.
although they just got Tyler Shuck. They did get so actually I don't know. I think Florida State is actually that's kind of where I would predict. I think Florida State's been the heavily rumored potential ACC back to the ACC for him. Well, look, Louisville or
Yeah, back to
Florida
the
State would
ACC
be
either
back
way.
to the ACC. But yeah, I guess any specific comments you want to make about DJU, Con?
He's really good. I hope he doesn't end up at Florida State.
We will see. Talking about a guy you know pretty well, Tyler Van Dyke,
Hmm.
dating back a couple years ago, looked like this potential first round pick, but just tough adversity, injuries that he's kind of maneuvered.
Yeah, last year was injuries and I think just a bad mesh with the offensive coordinator, which can really affect college players so much. This year, the struggles were more. He was injured again multiple times this year, so I don't want to say that like he was this terrible kid. Who knows what he was fighting through injury wise, but this year the struggles seemed to be more on him than on outside factors. But still, even this season, at the highs, you go, he might be the best quarterback in Miami history. And then at the lows, you go, I don't think he'd start for my high school team. So, which is, I guess, why he's 11th in the country. If you can figure out how to get every, ounce out of him, he might be the best quarterback on this list. But if you can't and it's inconsistent, and when it's bad, it's like just head scratching interceptions, that's not a guy you want starting at a major program. So I'll be intrigued to see where he goes, and I'll be rooting for him. But that's kind of my analysis on his game.
Gotcha. Yep. I think kind of the destinations I just talked about for Finn, I think I could see him, and he's been connected to Nebraska a bit. I could see him being a potential Big Ten guy. But I guess just look, quarterback absorbs a lot of the attention, a lot of our discussion here. I guess just two guys I think that are important to maybe touch on with Will Rogers, Grayson McCall. Will Rogers, I think, looks bound for Washington. That would be a very cool fit, I think, for him. That trying to really, I think, regain the form Will Rogers had of a couple seasons ago. That air raid, Washington, I think it's like almost a done deal, or maybe not quite, but I think that just looks like the place that a lot of people want to see him. Grayson McCall, kind of, I guess, if
Sorry, did we skip over Chandler Rogers? I was responding to a text.
we did, but
I just want to say, if you haven't watched this kid play, the arm on this guy is unbelievable. I mean,
okay.
I made their over one of my best bets one week because they score so many points. He's the guy who does the point scoring. Whoever lands him, and I don't know where he's being rumored or whatever, whoever lands him is getting a really, I think, a special talent.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good. Good call there. I kind of overlooked. I just went down to the more and
Curtis Rourke, I don't care about though. We can skip him.
And then
Jordan McLeod.
Yeah, so I was just skipping down here to Will Rogers and Grayson McCall. I think Rogers Washington bound, and McCall. I think McCall to NC State. I think would be very intriguing. We just saw Brennan Armstrong there.
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting destination. I don't know about. I kind of want to see him. Or I guess look, UCF would be intriguing as well.
I want to see him at Liberty. Get him back with Jamie Chadwell.
That was
an undeniable pairing.
That's very true. That's very true. And yeah, interesting. Yeah, really talk about with both Rogers and McCall. Guys, you just for the sake of the game, you want to see them kind of return to the form of their previous seasons. I think going down here further into the teens, just into the so many quarterbacks, it's insane to talk about here. But I think guys that are specifically worthy of some focus. We just talked about Max Johnson, or not just, but Max Johnson in terms of destination. UNC seemingly has their guy potentially within the portal, specifically speaking. Taylon Green's a guy, Boise State, pretty dynamic talent. Interested to see where he might end up, but I think he talked about, look, your guy Chandler Rogers just mentioned. I think Taylon Green's a name to watch as a potential guy to really maybe burst onto the scene wherever he maybe ends up. And maybe last name, Con, I'll give you the call you want to make. Maybe one last guy you want to talk about on this quarterback carousel list.
I'll take it and I'll mold two of them together.
Okay.
Blake Shapen and Bryson Barnes are both guys we've gotten to see play high level football. They've both had highs and struggled. So I think they're both gonna be, I don't know where they're rumored, but I could see them both being like a good option for maybe a team like Purdue that is still a Power 5 team but needs some help getting things back on track.
Okay, I like that. That's a good call for both those guys. I think that makes some sense. Going through, let's go running back. And running back, not as, naturally not as much of the limelight as the quarterbacks, but there are some talents. And I think just first look, Trevor Etienne, Travis's Brother, man, I'm seeing, wow, Georgia. That would be a heck of a landing spot to really kind of to be a guy that, returns to really that Georgia identity of, incredible ground game, really talented running back. That would be quite a destination for him. And I do like that for Trevor Etienne.
Yeah, he's a really good running back. He'll be in the NFL after next season, so this is a
Hmm.
1 year rental wherever he ends up going. But yeah, Georgia, sure. They get the best players. Why not get the best running back?
Yeah. And look, I think speaking to your point that you just mentioned, I think Ohio with just quickly with Etienne, I think Ohio State would maybe be an interesting spot. Or well, Henderson looks bound to return. Maybe a Michigan for Etienne too. Big Ten ground game schools. But speaking of guys that on the NFL look bound for the NFL this year, Raheem Rocket Sanders, just tough year for Arkansas as a whole.
Yeah.
And really with him and KJ Jefferson, although Jefferson still hasn't, he still hasn't confirmed if he's in the portal. I think South Carolina was the heavily rumored for KJ Jefferson, and even now
Yeah.
both Arkansas guys were now
Well,
just.
KJ Jefferson has to enter the
That's
portal
what I'm
for him to be
saying.
rumored anywhere.
Yeah, but immediately connected where it was
Yeah.
seemingly it's seemingly down with him. It's seemingly an either or potentially with he's
No.
either bound for the draft or potentially portal
Hmm.
South Carolina. It's almost like that's almost crystallizing his where he's at.
Hmm.
With Rocket Sanders, he's fully in the portal and potentially bound for my Gamecocks. It would be great. I would love to have him. He is a incredible talent. I've seen people kind of not really a huge fan of that at all for him, saying, "Oh, well, what's the point? You're trying to kind of rebound your draft stock potentially." Look, people know the talent he is, and I think we're South Carolina. It's not gonna. It can only get better from what
Hmm.
we've looked like this season, and we've got some recruits. We've got some high profile guys. Um, some of these younger guys we've had on our team, on our line especially, are only going to be better for next season. Have some experience under their
Yeah.
belt. I think Rocket Sanders. I like the fit. I'm not trying to take bias out there.
Yeah. Also, you guys have a decent NIL collective, and so go to a place where you can get paid where you're still
Yeah.
playing in the SEC and you're not going to be splitting reps. Because if you're
Hmm.
looking at Georgia, Alabama, whatever, you're going to be splitting at some point.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, he picked a spot in the SEC where he can make some money while he's trying to improve that draft stock, and he's still playing SEC football every weekend, so that helps with getting scouted. And he's yeah, like I said, he should be the every down back. So I think
Hmm.
it makes sense.
Yep. And it's funny you say with the NIL collective. Just I don't know. We're thought to be, or we were supposed to have this, incredible NIL pool and collective, but it's just been weird with. And I've talked about poaching from like we're like a feeder for a bunch of high profile. In the last year, we've lost. So speaking of running backs, Marshawn Lloyd, and now even Mario Anderson this season, a guy that was a Division II Newberry, I think, or some Rams obscure Division II transfer to come to South Carolina, and now he's one and done with South Carolina, potentially to a Oklahoma or USC. It's just crazy. But guys like Juice Wells, Jaheim Bell, Jordan Birch, all these guys are just leaving South Carolina, and it's tough. But we would love to have a guy like Rocket Sanders. Talking about a guy a little bit, maybe not a huge name, but I think rightfully, recognized Marcus Carroll with Georgia State. Georgia State's made some noise the last couple of seasons, and really, Marcus Carroll's been kind of at the helm with that
Yeah,
offense, and really interested to see where he maybe ends up. But
yeah, I agree. The Sun Belt has been great. The Fun Belt, as they call it.
sure, yeah,
No, it actually
absolutely.
has been with the American losing teams to the power conferences, and I think it's become the best group of five conference over the past couple years. They've had really good teams, and so he has been on show a little bit more than you usually would be playing at Georgia State, and he's been a great player. He is probably not a guy who's going to be playing at the next level, so
Hmm.
so this is I mean, I guess it's his chance to try to make that happen, but more than that, it's our chance to watch him have one more go at things.
Hmm. And I guess with running back, it's so unique. You never really know with the NFL futures. It's if you have a specific skill set.
Hmm.
But yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting name. I think. Look, for running back, it's so hard to try to predict where they are. So we would
Mhm.
just be doing a disservice throwing nails on or just completely guessing. But I think, look, just mentioning um, some guys specifically. I think Treshaun Ward, um, Kansas State losing both QB and RB. It's going to be a tough pill for him to swallow. But I think Treshaun Ward's a guy that I'm kind of got my eye on. Him going to potentially Indiana, where he's crystal ball.
Mhm.
That would be, I think, an interesting fit, intriguing. You just want to see Indiana kind of be on the up and up. Look, they just got JMU's head coach
Yep.
after he had a hell of a season. Potentially a team that maybe just bounce back, bounce back from multiple seasons
Yeah.
of lackluster kind of mediocrity. But
I'm surprised he's only listed as a 3-star here because
yeah, it's interesting. I think he is higher elsewhere. There's a little bit of a deviation in opinion, I
okay,
think, with him,
I think
but
that
I think
makes sense
he,
because he jumped off the screen when you watched Kansas State
yep,
this year.
definitely a dynamic player.
Mhm.
Con, I guess, is there any specific going through this list? I mean, is there anybody? I just mentioned Mario Anderson from my school, South Carolina. Yep, he's already been crystal balled to Oklahoma. I guess
Mhm.
just going through this con, anybody specifically?
Yeah, I mean Cheney Jr. is leaving from Miami, but
Mhm.
he's a very good player. Whoever um, ends up with him is going to be happy, and it's one of those things that just it's a really crowded backfield in that Miami locker room. They were really running four backs this year, so obviously if you want to play at the next level, you don't want to be in a four-person split in the backfield. So don't begrudge him for that at all. But very good player, 4-star out of high school. I don't know where he's rumored to go, but wherever he ends up, I'm sure he'll have a great career. But other than that, it's running back such a position that you know guys almost feel interchangeable at the college level.
Mhm.
That it's not. None of these guys are going to affect the team the way that any of the quarterbacks we talked about will.
Mhm. Pretty subject to change, kind of influx position
Hmm.
rotations. I mean, even a guy like Chip Trainum, I mean, gets a considerable
Yeah.
role with Ohio State here. Just interesting. EJ Smith, interesting
Yep.
option. Maybe he goes potentially thrown out there. Maybe he goes to SMU, back to Dallas, back where he's from. But yeah, some interesting names. Definitely guys that could be, focal points of offenses this
Hmm.
come next year. All right, that kind of does it for this week's Friday episode. Con, tune in. We got still. There's so much to talk about still with picking up where we left off with transfer portal guys, but especially more notably, I think program guys, program changers, the actual captains of the ship, head coaching carousel news and thoughts. We'll bring that to you next episode. And look, with that, Con, any closing words for today for this show?
I got nothing for you except that I'm Mike Elko and he's Mark Stoops.
I like where I am, man. I got it good.